guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Room. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty room for all things Formula 1. The Spanish Grand Prix has come to a close, and what could be said? An exciting race at Spain. This is the second year running now. Of course, last year we had the strategy with Hamilton pitting and then having to re-catch Max up, which he did do, and won the race that way. And this year it was the which way to go. Was it a one-stop that some people were suggesting the likes of Sergio Perez were going to do? Was it a two-stop? And then it quickly became a three-stop. It was great to see a variety of pit stop strategies going on different tyre compounds. The hard tyre was rarely used, as it rarely is anyway at this circuit. I think Kevin Magnussen tried it and didn't really work out. But overall, a really, really good race. If I had to give it a score out of 10, like I do on the Crawl Room anyway, I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. It was definitely a good race weekend. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers out of a maximum of 10 points if they have a particularly good weekend, and I go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. Look out for bonus points though. They are on offer if someone does something extra special during a race, and on the very rare occasion someone does something extra special for all the wrong reasons, I award minus points too. So let's take a look at the current standings of the Crawl Room leaderboard now. It's on the screen for you. Take a look, have a butcher, see what you think, find out where your favourite driver is. Could you see him climbing or falling? There's a lot there to be decided. It's still early days, but the Crawl Room Championship is forming nicely. I'm enjoying how it's going so far. There's some surprising names at the top and a few surprising names at the bottom as well. So we're going to kick things off with the race winner, of course, Max Verstappen. And the race winner didn't look like he was going to be winning that race at the early phase of that, did he? He certainly was having DRS issues, wasn't he? He was struggling to get past George Russell. He had a spin. Leclerc was gone and up the road. He was not looking like he was going to be the winner today. And not only to mention that, but not only with the DRS issues, he was on provisional pole position. Charles bettered him to score the pole position. And of course, Max Verstappen unable to, because a problem with his car meant that unfortunately, that was that. He couldn't do a faster lap time. Problem with no power, he said, didn't he, I think. So he couldn't set a fast lap time and lined up second. So it was really not looking in the way of Max Verstappen or the Red Bull squad this weekend to get a good result. Certainly wasn't looking like the 1-2 they got this weekend. But for Max's race, I mean, the spin, it was really unfortunate. I think he spun, it was early stages of the race, wasn't it? Around lap 8, lap 9. I don't think it was quite double figures. But he had a spin, but he followed Carlos Sainz, who did it like a couple of laps prior to him. So gusts of wind there were catching cars unaware. No one else did it. Just Sainz and Verstappen, so, you know, one of those things. Should he really have not done that? Yeah, he didn't quite go full pirouette, did he, like Sainz, but still a trip through the gravel cost him time, put him behind George Russell, and he could not get around George Russell, could it? George was putting up a mighty defence in a much improved Mercedes, it must be said. Still not quite a race-winning car that yet, but certainly on pace. And he did a cracking job, did George. And Max, frustrated, the DRS wasn't working. Then when it was working, it wasn't close enough. And it was all just a bit of a mess. But then the race all came into his hands with the likes of Leclerc dropping out and him finally being able to get past George Russell, courtesy of a strategy call by Red Bull. And he was assisted, of course, at the end where Perez was told not to fight him, and in the end he just gave up the position. So for Max Verstappen this weekend, I'm going to award him 8 points on the Crawl Room. And the reason I'm knocking him a couple of points off there is because, one, he had that spin, that's a point. Had that not happened, he could have been closer to Charles and he could have took a fairly comfortable victory. But as the team said, we have to do it the hard way sometimes. The DRS was an issue that wasn't his fault, which is why he couldn't get past George. But, you know, he said he was pressing the button 50 times. Sometimes he was closing it himself as well. So a lot of frustration in that car, and that's the other reason why I'm knocking another point off. The frustration within the car, whinging about the DRS, yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, we can't even get the fucking fundamentals right. Yeah, we know, Max. But that's the card you dealt with. Crack on, son. Crack on. But, you know, so there you go. That's why I'm knocking the 2 points off. 1 for the spin. Secondly, for his attitude. At the end of the day, he wouldn't need a DRS if he didn't spin, did he? So, you know, it all swings and roundabouts. So, yeah, 8 points to Max Verstappen. Extends, well, he doesn't extend his lead, does he? He actually takes the lead of the championship for the first time this season. But, yeah, overall, a great weekend for Red Bull. Max, not his finest hour, but still a decent result. And next up, as mentioned, it is Checo. Sergio Perez in second place, securing a 1-2 finish for the Red Bull team. Is that their second one in a couple of races. Did they have one at Imola? I think they did, didn't they? Did they have a 1-2 at Imola? Either way, it's certainly a strong result for him, and taking the maximum 44 points as well, because Checo secured the fastest lap point, so that was well worthy noting for Red Bull. So not only do, of course, Max Verstappen take the lead of the drivers, but the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull are now ahead in that as well. So as for Checo, he drove a good race. Qualifying wasn't the best, was it? Let's be honest. Qualifying wasn't the best, but the start was cracking. He was nearly up to third place there, but had to relinquish from George Russell. Made a little bit of contact with him at the start. Then it was line astern for a while. He, of course, benefited from Max's spin, but then he had to let Max go in the early part of the race so he could attack George. And it just didn't really work, did it? It just didn't really work. And then Max eventually pitted when they realised he got DRS issues to let Perez have a go. Perez got past Russell. And then the whole pit stop strategy phase of it all mixed it all up. And Perez was ahead on track. He was ahead on track. Max was on much fresher tyres. And, you know, I think Max would have caught Perez up anyway. And I think maybe, just maybe, he would have overtaken him. But with the DRS issue that Max had the spin as well. I don't think it's fair, 6 races into this championship, that Perez has had to yield that position for P1. Of course, we don't want teammates taking each other out. We don't want that. The team certainly don't want that. But I think both drivers are clever enough not to do anything silly. But we're in this situation where Perez was like 3 seconds up the road from Max, and then they went over the team radio, just so you know, Max is on a different strategy. And then he lost all that time. Didn't get him on the straight because Max didn't have DRS, but let him go at the end of Sector 1. And he said, yeah, it's not fair, but I'll do it. And, you know, that is literally sums up Perez, doesn't it? I think it's very, very unfair this early into a season that they have given the team orders for Perez to not even be able to have a chance to fight for the victory. I'm not saying he would have got the victory, but it's a big shame that he wasn't even allowed to have a chance. There we go. That's my personal opinions. Checo Perez this weekend is getting 10 points. He's getting a full 10 from me. The qualifying wasn't the best, I admit that. The race itself, it looked like he was going to get bottled up behind George for a while. But then in the end, it was like none of this was his fault while he was leading the race. You know, he was leading that race on merit. Okay, Charles dropped out. Okay, your teammate had a spin. But you're leading that race on merit because you've not spun, you've not broken down, and you should have been given the chance, Checo. So, a little bit annoyed, a little bit aggrieved, but fair play to Checo for being humble in defeat, congratulating the team for a team result, but we're going to talk about it afterwards. And I hope you do, Checo, because that is unfair, in my eyes, that you could not fight for victory today. And it's been noted, and that's why you're getting 10 points. Well done, Checo. Shame you couldn't fight for victory. Then we come to George of the Russell. Watch out for that top 5. And here he is on the podium. Fantastic stuff. The second podium of the season for him, and the third podium of the season, of course, for the Mercedes team. In what I mentioned earlier is a much improved Mercedes car that seemed to have sorted out the porpoising. Not doing it as much, just fractionally at the end of the straights you could notice every now and again. But apart from that, the car looks well balanced. It looks stable. It's not a race winner. It's not a race winner, but it can defend from the likes of Perez and Verstappen, and he drove a blinding race, did George do that. He was lapping 1 second a lap slower than Charles Leclerc, who'd just gone off into the distance. But yeah, it was a great defensive drive by George. He had every right to do what he did. It was always fair as well. I think he always left a car's width, even when he was sort of jerking a little bit late. He still left a car's width for someone to lunge up the inside. You know, he was racing really fair. And fair play to George Russell, thoroughly deserving of the podium and thoroughly deserving of 10 points on the Cruel Room. He is having a sublime season in a car that isn't quite there yet, but as mentioned, improved. Very, very well improved. We could see that competing for race wins very soon, I feel. He's done a good job as George, and, you know, with the likes of Hamilton's pace as well, it looks like they've got good race pace. So, iron out a few more teething issues, get on top of it a little bit more. I can safely say, once we get back after the summer break, I think Mercedes are going to be challenging for victories. Won't be a championship winning car this year. I don't think I'm expecting anything that drastic to happen, but for the year after, I think I'd be watching my back if I were Red Bull and Ferrari, especially the way they keep dropping the ball with reliability issues. George, while we're on the topic with reliability issues, of course, had to have a cooling issues with the car. So that's the first time we've seen a falter from Mercedes in terms of reliability. But again, both cars made it to the finish, both cars in the points. So yeah, George Russell, full 10 points on the cruel room. Very, very happy boy. Great to see him doing so well in that Mercedes car. And then we come to Carlos Sainz in 4th place. And oh, Carlos. Oh, Carlos. Oh, I don't know what to say about you, pal, to be honest. It's just a bit disappointing once again, isn't it? Needs to string a good race weekend together, and he doesn't get it together in qualifying. And in the race, he gets caught out by the gust of wind. He was the first one to do it. Drops it at turn 4. Spins down to 11th. Almost clatters into Gasly on the way through as well while he was recovering. And overall, just incredibly disappointing race. Here he is in 4th. He could have been 2nd today. I don't think he'd have had the win because Max and Charles seem to be in a league of their own at the moment up front. But he could have been 2nd. I think he could have beat Checo. He should have beaten Checo. And he's certainly been ahead, of course, of George Russell. And let's not mention as well, he was overtaken by Hamilton at the end as well, before Hamilton's cooling issues meant that he had to relinquish that position to Sainz. So Sainz, in theory, finished P5 in my eyes and just were merited P4 by an unfortunate Hamilton. So for Carlos Sainz, it's a generous 6. It's a very generous 6. Close to Palmer's now, again, for Carlos Sainz, because it's just not delivering, is it? He's not delivering. If Charles is out of the race, you'd expect Sainz to win. If he can't win, at least be 2nd. Nowhere near. A lucky P4. Should have been P5 today. 6 points to Carlos Sainz. And next we come to Lewis Hamilton, of course, in P5. My personal driver of the day. What a drive he had. Okay, you know, we're going to say, well, George beat him and he beat him in qualifying. And yeah, he did. But what a cracking drive by Hamilton, my driver of the day, and he thoroughly deserved P4. He was robbed at the end there. The cooling issue with the car that was close to a DNF, he had a water leak actually, or coolant leak, so that meant that if it had not slowed down properly a lot, then the car could have quickly overheated and it'd have been on the side of the road scoring nothing. So at least he got 5th. A really, really strong recovery. Who could have said that from being lap 1, turn 4, puncture, back of the grid, a minute behind everyone else, and you still managed to recover to P5, 1 place above where you qualified. Yeah, not a lot of people could there. It was a great drive by him. He was carving his way through the field nicely. The strategy was right by Mercedes. They did a good strategy to get ahead of a few cars without having to actually overtake them on track, and drove really, really well. The only criticism I've got from him is that on lap 5 he made that stupid radio comment about, I think we should just park it, guys, and save the engine. Now, it was just frustration on his part. I totally understand it. You know, I understand the frustration he's had this year. He's not been lucky this year. It was just a silly comment, wasn't it? It was a needless comment to make. And as can be seen, this is why you don't throw in the towel, because here you are finishing in P5. Could have been P4. And, you know, that just irritates me a little bit. That just grinds my gears a little bit and takes away from what was an absolutely mega storming drive. Just puts that little dampener on it for me. But having said that, a cracking drive, a great car through the field, did really, really, really well. And yeah, for that reason, I'm going to award him 11 points. 11 points on the cruel room for Lewis Hamilton. The only thing I do just want to address is the ones that are saying that, God, if Hamilton hadn't had that contact at the start, he could have won the race. We need to be realistic here, guys. The best he were going to get, had he not had the contact, would have been P3. Because the Red Bulls, the Ferraris, are so much faster. So much faster. And, of course, the issues that unfolded in the race, George was P3 and he had no issues. He had no issues and he was P3, George. Couldn't hold the Red Bulls off. He had a good attempt, but he couldn't hold them off in the end. And that would have been the same situation for Hamilton. That's not putting Hamilton down in any way, shape or form. It's just a fact. The Mercedes isn't a race-winning car yet. It can maybe get there now if it's ahead of them. It can keep the likes of Red Bull and Ferrari behind them for a while, but not for eternity. It can't do it for an entire race. So I don't want to discredit Lewis Hamilton at all, but the people that are saying Hamilton could have won had he not had that contact, just have a little bit of a reality check there. The car is not ready to win races yet, and it's as simple as that. But a storming drive by Lewis Hamilton and 11 points on the cruel room. Well done to you. Big, big score, that. and my driver of the day. And then we come to Valtteri Bottas, and what could be said for the Alfa Romeo driver? A good qualifying in P7 and a great race. He was running around in P4 for a long time, wasn't he? And it was just a shame that the strategy didn't work out. He got mugged at the end, didn't he, by Sainz and by Hamilton. He mounted a late charge back on Hamilton as he slowed down. In the end, it was about 5.5 seconds gap, reduced from about 11, so not enough to get him. And here he is finishing in P6. A great drive by Valtteri. The wrong strategy call by Alfa Romeo. I think had they pitted him for an extra set of softs, we could have seen him ahead of Sainz. We could have certainly seen him ahead of a Hailing Hamilton if they'd have pitted him within a window. When the likes of Ocon went in and Alonso went in, there was a big gap that could have got Bottas in there. Okay, it'd have lost track position, but I think Bottas could have come storming through to at least take Hamilton that had the problems at the end. So, potential P5 loss there, but P6, 8 points on the board. Another cracking drive by Bottas, running around in the podium positions. Out of position, of course, because he'd not had his pit stop, but a lovely sight to see once again. And it's 9 points on the board to Valtteri Bottas, doing a stunning job once again for Alfa Romeo and delivering some big points. Then we come to Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, Alpindia, whatever you want to call it, and it was a great drive by him, a good qualifying as well. The car didn't look to have the pace in qualifying, did it? He only just scraped through into Q2, Alonso out in Q1 of course, and then he managed to get a better lap together, so he qualified 12th. In the race, stormed up through the field. He was about 8th, wasn't he? And then here he is in the end, finishing in P7. Of course, you know, he benefited from Leclerc's retirement, but that's still a points-paying position regardless for Esteban Ocon. And P7, a stunning drive. I can't quite remember where Alpine went on the strategies. It was definitely a 3-stop. They pitted him late-ish, but not as late as others, if that makes sense. It was very all confusing in the mid-pack, seeing how drivers got to where they were. Because 1 minute they were nowhere, and the next thing you know, they're in the bottom half of the top 10 scoring some good points. It was all a bit difficult to work out. But for Esteban Ocon, a great drive, and it's going to be 9 points on the crawl room to him. 30 points on the championship he's got now in the overall championship, which is great to see. He's doing really well in a car that sometimes looks good, sometimes looks terrible. This time, didn't have the qualifying pace, but the race pace was certainly there, and clearly a good strategy as well. So 9 points to Esteban Ocon. And then we come to Lando Norris in the McLaren. What a good drive by him. Qualifying, it was unfortunate, wasn't he? He got into Q3 initially, had his lap time disallowed because of track limits that were that much over. But it's the same for everyone, and rules are rules. So he qualified P11. He didn't have a great start, did he? I think he stayed around there. Maybe he only got up to about 10th. But overall, the strategy is what brought him here into the points today. And his great driving, because, of course, he was out-qualified by Daniel Ricciardo, but he's finished ahead of Daniel Ricciardo once again. So, Lando Norris, great drive, a good few points for McLaren. Not the best race we've seen from him this season, but it was at least solid. Battling around the cars, he could have maybe picked up Ocon, etc. You know, he was doing a good job. So, for Lando Norris, it's going to be 8 points on the crawl room to him. A solid drive with the car he's been given. Unlucky in qualifying, but rules are rules. I don't blame him for enforcing them. So yeah, there we go. 8 points to Lando Norris. And then we come to Fernando Alonso. Here he is, finishing in P9. And you think, wow, he's finally doubled his points tally from 2 to 4. Fantastic stuff. But he had to work really hard for those points today, didn't he, our Fernando? Qualified 17th, had mentioned he missed out, and it was an early Q1 exit, a surprise as well. The Alpine team didn't look overly surprised though, but they looked a little bit disappointed in the paddock. And then the race pace, he has a new power unit because, of course, why, you may as well take 10 place drop if you're already 17th. Started 20th on the grid and drove really well. He was up to like 13th or 14th in the early phases of the race. And then from there, strategy got him through the pack. He was on board with Alonso. Who's he overtaking this time? It's Gazlin, it's Synoda, it's Ricardo, it's Norris. He was doing a really good job. Unfortunately for him, he had a slow pit stop in his final stop. And Alpine believe that is what cost him from not getting on the back of Lando Norris and being able to overtake him. So we maybe could have trebled his points tally from 2 to 6 had that happened. But it wasn't to be, and that is part of racing. But nonetheless, Fernando Alonso from 20th to 9th, cracking effort. 9 points on the crawl room. Not quite a perfect 10, Fernando, because I'd have just liked to seen you scrape through into Q2 like Esteban Ocon did. But that is the only fault I've got with you this weekend. It was worthy of a point, because where could you have been had you been inside Q2? Maybe you'd have not taken the engine penalty either at that point, and then you could have worked your way even further up. Could you have been where Bottas were? The pace looked like it could have been. So yeah, 9 points to Fernando Alonso. Next up, we have Yuki Synoda securing 1 whole point for the AlphaTauri team. And I don't know what's up with AlphaTauri at the moment, but they just don't seem to be the regular team that they once were. They used to be, you know, Gazlin up there in P6, P7 doing something really special. But these last couple of races have been race weekends to forget for AlphaTauri. But at least Synoda comes away from Spain with 1 point. It's better than nothing, I suppose. Synoda's race was really a decent one, it must be said. I kind of got lost with how his strategy worked and how it played out, etc. But he had to make a move on Mick Schumacher for that 10th place initially, so he managed to get that job done. I think Mick was only a 2-stopper though, as opposed to Synoda a 3. But he didn't have the match for the likes of the Alpines. I seem to remember watching replays of Alonso and Ocon getting past him on the road. So yeah, the AlphaTauri not looking great at the moment, is it? But Synoda, for the second race weekend running out, qualifies his teammate. Okay, the Miami race itself was absolutely shambolic for Synoda. But here in Spain, he outraces him as well. So Yuki Synoda, a great solid drive there to secure 1 whole point, which seems bizarre that I'm saying that that's a good result for an AlphaTauri, but this is the season we're in now, all topsy-turvy, upside down, and had it not been for Leclerc retiring, then there you go, it'd have been outside the points. But for Synoda, it's going to be 8 points on the board to him. I think it was the best job he could do with the car he was given. Outraced his teammate, outqualified his teammate, and secured a point for the team. I don't think he could have done anything more than that. It just wasn't really special how he did it. He just happened to end up 10th, I think is the basic way of how that works out. It just happened that he was 10th. So yeah, a solid job by Yuki Synoda and 8 points to him. Next up is Sebastian Vettel, just outside the points in P11, which is so frustrating for him. Qualifying was even more frustrating, wasn't it? He was a fraction of a... He was like that much away from securing his place in Q2 and taking out Esteban Ocon. It was like 3/4 of a tenth. It was hardly anything, but no, he was out. Of course, a lot of controversy with Aston Martin at the moment, looking like a Red Bull car, but in green. We've heard that before, haven't we, as well, with that team seem to be looking like other cars. We had a pink Mercedes, now we've got a green Red Bull. So there we go, what happens, happens. But yeah, P11 for Sebastian Vettel, a solid job, a great drive. Not quite the points that maybe Aston Martin would have been hoping for, but having said that, Aston Martin, I think they'll take anything they can get at the moment, and P11 is certainly better than down in the back or crashing like they have been known to do. So yeah, good job by Sebastian Vettel, and for that reason it's 8 points to him as well. Solid effort, Sebastian. Shame he didn't pick up a point. I think if he'd have picked up a point, it'd have been bonus points potentially. But yeah, it was okay. It was a good drive. It was nothing overly special, but he came close to securing a point. And I think in Aston Martin, that is a good achievement for where they are at the moment. And then we come to Daniel Ricciardo, and oh, Danny Rick. Danny Rick again, P nowhere. Here he is, P12. His teammate picks up 8th place. Secures 4 points. Not the most dramatic of scores by any stretch of the imagination, but he's scoring. Daniel Ricciardo isn't. It's a big issue, isn't it? Oh, it's getting a bit tedious now with him, but once again, I just couldn't quite remember how the strategies worked. Did that play for him? Did that play against him? Not too sure. He's in 12th nonetheless, isn't he? So it's just going to be 4 points to Daniel Ricciardo, and a generous 4. He avoids a Palmer again, just, and I don't know why I'm so bloody lenient to him at the minute, because he is doing diabolical. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to be Palmer worthy, though. It's nothing that he's done drastically wrong. He just doesn't seem to have the pace. So there we go. I think I'm going to have to get a bit crueler coming in the future races. I mean, Monaco again, coming up for Daniel Ricciardo. The circuit where he got redemption. The circuit where he almost won a couple of years prior to the redemption as well. And you think, God, it's his own track. He did dismal last year. Will he do dismal again this year? Time will tell. But for Spain, P nowhere. P12, no points. 4 points on the crawl room. And then we come to Pierre Gazlin in an unlucky for some P13, and certainly unlucky for Pierre Gazlin, as already mentioned. Outqualified by his teammate and outraced by his teammate as well. Again, with the strategies, I'm not quite sure how it all played out. Maybe Gazlin had a bad one. But having said that, he was one of the late stoppers with the likes of Alonso and Ocon as well, if I remember rightly. I might be wrong on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure I will be, but I seem to remember him being one of the last stoppers and pitting around the times that Ocon and Alonso did. So, there we go. But Gasly down in P13, doing nothing. At least Synoda got a point. 3 points to Gasly. We've not really seen the best of him these last couple of races, have we? We've not seen what he's used to. But, having said that, if he starts delivering some good results again soon, could he be in the eyes of that McLaren seat and taking it off Ricardo? Because I'm sure Gasly's got the talent there. He just needs to unlock it. Clearly just struggling a little bit with the AlphaTauri at the moment, but still a decent driver, and I do highly rate him. It's just that Spain wasn't anything special. In fact, it was a little bit lonely for him, so just 3 points on the cruel room for Pierre Gazlin. And in 14th place, we have Mick Schumacher. Oh, it looked like he could have scored some points again. What a great start by Mick. Up as high as 6th, and then he just tumbled down the order to around 9th, wasn't it, before the first round of stops. And then he was only a 2-stopper, and he was running around in 9th, but then was quickly swallowed up and quickly went down to 11th after Synoda got past him, and then here he is, ended up in P14 in the end. The soft runners towards the end getting the better of him, but it wasn't for points anyway at that stage. The race was over once Synoda got past him for P10. So yeah, shame for Mick. Wrong strategy call by Haas. Did very much like what Alfa Romeo did with Bottas, but Haas just didn't have the pace to pull it off like Bottas did. Even Bottas was a wrong call and could have cost himself some points, but at least he was able to stay in the points. Whereas this, for Haas, no points again, so P14. Bad strategy call. Mick had a good race. First time in Q3. Had a good start, had a good race, kept himself out of trouble, but in the end, just P14. So it's just middle of the road 5 to Mick Schumacher. I blame the strategy more than I blame him. But, having said that, we saw other drivers on the other alternate strategy, like Bottas, that was able to stay up there. So, you know, I know it's different cars, but we saw Haas rivaling and matching Alfa Romeo at the early stages of this season. So far, not so much. So yeah, 5 points to Mick Schumacher. And then we come to Lance Stroll, and what could be said for Lance? Oh, it was a little bit of an unfortunate race weekend for him, wasn't it? Bit of a one to forget. He had a bad qualifying. In the race, he was running round sort of where his teammate was, wasn't he? He was behind Vettel for most of it, so they were going line astern. Points wouldn't have been possible anyway. And then he had a tangle. Was it with Nick Latifi or with Pierre Gazlin, actually? And now I come to think of it, could have been Gazlin. And he got spun round at turn 1 after a bit of contact with Gazlin. I'll just say another car, actually, because I'm not sure if it was Gazlin or Latifi. But nonetheless, got turned around. That cost him a bit of time, and here he is finishing in P15. Nothing special, nothing great, just a Aston Martin not doing that brilliantly. Vettel's on the cusp of points. Lance Stroll's down here in 15th, not doing anything special. So it's 4 points to Lance Stroll. Nothing special today, I'm afraid, by Lance Stroll. And it's at 4 points. And in 16th place, it is Nicholas Latifi. Hallelujah! 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 Fantastic stuff, Nick. What a cracking drive. I actually got to say that. That was a good drive by Nicholas Latifi. Was he still dog shit? Yes, absolutely he was. But here he is, finishing ahead of K-Mag and his teammate Alexander Albon on the road. And it is worth mentioning that in qualifying, he didn't put a bad lap time in, but he was still last. But it was a respectable lap time. He wasn't miles off the pace like he was in Miami. And then in the race, he overtook Albon for track position in the early phases of the race, within the first 15 laps, something like that. And then he stayed ahead of him for the rest of it. And in the end, I think he's something like 40-odd seconds ahead of Albon. So Albon either had an extra pit stop or had some big problems in that all the Williams, because not like Albon to be that far off the pace of his teammate. You know, we've not seen it all this season. We've not seen him at all being beaten by his teammate, let alone by about 40 seconds. So I do want to praise Latifi where it is concerned, and I am going to award him 7 points. He is booking his ideas up now and pulling away from Mick Schumacher for that coveted last position in the Cruel Room standings. But, you know, Latifi, he came into practice, it was Latifi and De Vries. De Vries beat him by about 2/10 in practice 1, and you're like, oh my God, you know, like, it was like, oh, here we go, like, get him in, get Nick in now, get Nick de Vries straight in, because that's what we need. But in the race, he's delivered a good result. So I can't really blame him that much. I think he's done a good job. I think Alban must have been hampered somehow, but I don't know, so I'm not going to comment on it. But, you know, a good race by Latifi's standards. 7 points to him. As mentioned, finishing behind Nicholas Latifi is, of course, Kevin Magnussen.
How long's a piece of string, someone once asked me? Longer than my F1 career was my reply.
It just had to be, didn't it? It had to be Palmer of the week to Kevin Magnussen. These last couple of races have not gone Haas's way, and they've certainly not gone Kevin Magnussen's way either. He could have had points today. He could have had points, and it was just a little bit overzealous at the start, wasn't it, to make contact with Lewis. People were saying Lewis was understeering, but I don't think he was. I just genuinely think that K-Mag went round the outside and just misjudged where Hamilton's front wheel was compared to his own, and they just had wheel-to-wheel contact. That straightened K-Mag's wheel up, and off he went through the gravel. And from there, he did absolutely nothing. I believe he was the only driver to try the hard tyres. Didn't work out. I mean, what does it matter anyway? I think he was already a lap down, like, really early on in the race, actually. So it didn't really matter what they tried. It just wasn't going to really benefit him. They'd have needed safety cars to then get back on the crocodile and get back into the swing of things. Even then, they'd have still had a whole host of cars to overtake. So yeah, K-Mag, a Palmer of the week, and it has to be, because I believe it was more his fault than it were Hamilton's, but both drivers suffered as a result. So racing incident, I must admit, I do think it was, but I would lay the blame more on Kevin Magnussen for turning in to Lewis at turn 4 there, and it was just a little bit unnecessary. Yeah, you need to make all the positions up you can at the start. It's a circuit that's difficult to overtake, but you didn't need to do a desperate one round the outside and try and hold it round the outside of turn 4 to try and get the inside for turn 5. In that certain situation, it just didn't need it. So, big shame for K-Mag to lose out. A Palmer of the week to him. There we go. Unfortunate overall, but that's racing. I'm sure he'll come back stronger in Monaco. But for now, it's just Palmer of the week. So we come then to the last of the finishes. It is Alexander Albon, unfortunately, in the Williams car. He was gone from hero to zero. It does seem that way, doesn't it? But I'm not convinced that this is all Alex is doing. I'm sure there must have been something wrong with the car at some stage. He got overtaken by Latifi early on in the race, and then the gap just kept building and building and building and building to the point where Kevin Magnussen, who was mentioned, was lapped really early on in the race, managed to come through and overtake him as well. So big shame that for Alex. A lot of head scratching to do down at Williams. I'm not saying that there definitely was an issue, but it looks like there could have been. If there wasn't, let's have a big debrief about it, because we're not used to seeing Albon finishing last of the runners. We're used to seeing him mixing up there with the cars that he shouldn't normally be mixing up with. But everyone has an off day, everyone has an off race weekend, and even if there wasn't an issue with the car, we'll allow him one off weekend here at Spain. It's just has to happen at some point, doesn't it? So fingers crossed Monaco is much better for Alex, and if he gets a good qualifying position, who knows? He could hold them all behind him and score some more points. But yeah, an unfortunate one for Alex, and for that reason it's just 4 points on the crawl room. Don't know if it's a mechanical issue or not. Even if it was a mechanical issue, he'd probably only be getting 5 anyway. But erring on the side of caution that it was just an off weekend for Alexander Albon. 4 points to him. And then we come to the first of the retirements on this list. The last one to retire in the race, of course, although it was in quick succession, wasn't it? It was Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo. It's going to be 3 points to Zhou. Wasn't great in qualifying. Was P nowhere when he eventually broke down. And yeah, even if it had not broken down, would he have scored points? Probably not. It's getting a little bit frustrated now. He had that strong start with the points at Bahrain. He had a couple of 11th places to follow where you're like, oh, come on, Zhou, just that one more position. And then sadly, with these last couple of races, he's not had the luck on his side, has he? He retired from Miami with mechanical problems. He's retired here with mechanical problems. But prior to the retirements, it didn't look like he had the pace anyway. So big shame. And out of the maximum of 5 I always award a retired driver, he's getting a maximum of 3. So if you see it as, if you were to score it out of 10, it'd be 6 out of 10. So that's how I work it out. But yeah, he certainly doesn't deserve a full 5 that I can give him. It's just one of those things, unfortunately, for Zhou. And fingers crossed for Monaco that it's much better for him. And last but by no means least is Charles la la. I can't even say it with passion. He had got that race under control, hasn't it? A stunning pole position lap time there by him. And a stunning start meant he just took the lead. Everyone else had their issues behind him. He just carried on. He got a 14-second gap over George Russell before his car expired. An engine, a power unit issue is what Ferrari mentioned it as. And a big, big shame for Charles Leclerc. It was nice to see him hugging the team and giving him high fives at the end there. Pulled into the pits and retired, was very disappointed. But as he said, a lot of positives to take. The race pace was good. He said he was managing his tyres well. And overall, he was breaking away from the cars behind. So a lot of positives, but sadly no points for Charles Leclerc. And it is just going to be 5 points on the crawl room. As mentioned, the maximum a DNF driver can score is 5. He gets the full 5. It was a cracking drive. He'd have won that. He'd have won that hands down. What a shame Ferrari reliability creeps in once again. What a shame, what a shame. Ferrari have always got a habit of throwing things away, hasn't it? But come on, Charles, Monaco next week, and let's break that duck to you not being able to finish there, let alone score points. And fingers crossed for you at Monaco that you have a stunning result. But for now, 5 points on the crawl room, and a sad way for you to end the race. So there we have it, guys. Those were the runners and riders of the Spanish Grand Prix. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Did I score any drivers too high? Any too low? The scoreboard updated now with the scores I've just given is on the screen now. Take a good old look at it. See the climbers and the fallers. There are no positions currently tied at the moment. Everyone has their outright position there. So they're all P1 down to P20. That doesn't happen very often, but there we go. It's happened after the Spanish Grand Prix. As always, guys, let me know where your favourite drivers are on the leaderboard. Who can you see winning it this year as well? I know we're early stages, but it's a right mixed up bag of mashings at the moment on that leaderboard. And as always, a massive thank you to Dan of Mushy Gaming for providing me with this crawl room scoreboard. Without him, this series would be more pointless than it already is. And of course, who can forget Dave, F1 Games PlayStation, for providing me with the Jolie and Palmer skits that you all know and love by now. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you all next week for the Monaco Grand Prix. Don't forget, it's not a procession. It's not a procession. It's a great circuit, Monaco, and it all counts on that Saturday. If you have a stunning qualifying, you deserve to stay there and win the bloody thing. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to wring the extra neck out of it. You're going to see the drivers on the limits at Monaco, and I cannot wait. I'm tipping it's going to be an exciting one, actually, but we'll wait and see. We shall wait and see. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always, much love.